You're welcome back. This is Newsfile, it's the most authoritative news analysis platform. My guest, Kekubako, Dr. Akwete, Suleiman Ibrahima, and also Kofi Bento. Now, before we move on to issues of Manasseh's expose and the matters that are coming as a result of that, and dovetailing into the militia's disbandments, discussions, whether or not there is commitment or it is simply being reduced to exchange of letters and the intervention of CSOs about the need for a mediator and among others. Let me just read one more message to you. Dr. Akufo-Addo sends this message from Evans, Georgia. He says, please extend a big welcome to Malik Kekubako. For me, I thought the free fall of the CD emasculated him in the midst of lacerations that have faced that have laced the face of Ghana's public discourse in recent times. Okay, so Kuku has heard you, but I think sometimes we may not have to forget about what particularly has happened to the economy as regards the bank crisis. And as we speak, many people, hundreds, perhaps in their thousands, can't have the access to their monies. In fact, with institutions that have all the good name, that were managing people's monies, they simply can't access their monies because things appear to have gone wrong as a result of the sort of meltdown in the banking industry. So, I don't know where we begin this. Manasseh's expose, militia in the heart of the city. The CID has begun probe into death threats, alleged death threats on Manasseh after the expose. Government has responded on the issue of Osu Castle. It is unimpressed with the Pentecostal Council's intervention, saying that there may be something that we all are not aware. The museum's board issued a statement saying that Castle Osu is a museum and it is not a security installation. Of course, we have the Ghana Armed Forces who also issued a statement saying that they were never involved in any operation as was alleged. And then a lot of things have come up. So let me see where Kofi would like to start on this matter.
Well, it's a big issue, but honestly, it's
unfortunate. In fact, there's a petition to the NMC.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that these militia things are papering over some really serious issues like the bank crisis and the millions suffering under it. Okay. Some of the things that we should have been talking about like GMPC, but let's still deal with it. So Manasseh, and he's received a lot of, blowback because people are saying, well, he called a duck a swan.
Yeah.
I don't think that's important. People say, well, they were wearing suits and white shirts, so they are not a militia. People say, well, they were not carrying arms, so they are not a militia. There is a law against that action. Military training, unauthorized military training. So, Manasseh saw something, it looked and quacked like a duck. Yes, maybe you can have little things to say about this or that, but he is absolutely correct to expose it for what it is and to alert the nation to it and for the people who are in charge to do something about it. Clearly, the responses that have come have been defensive at best and disingenuous. Now you have people suing him, all well and good. So sometimes when it happens, we will get into the matters, we'll clarify them, but Manasseh should know that he has the support of the right-thinking members of the society who feel that we will be at the losing end if these things blow up. If you said they were not holding arms, have you seen the Hawks training with arms before? Or Azoka boys training with arms before? The others that we know as militia, who has seen them in flagrante delicto, acting as a militia?
We have.
Well,
there have been occasions we have. When it comes to the NPP's headquarters and the problems that were there was shooting at that place.
This is in their action.
Attributed to the invisible forces.
I'm talking about their training.
When it comes to the Azoka, Kandahar boys and by-elections, we have heard of them using arms.
So you don't see them training and using it, but you see it in their actions and then we can record it. Do we want to wait for these people who have been seen providing security at a national function to start now interfering in some other place like an election also before we say here's a problem. I think Manasseh did an absolutely fantastic job. We are all the better
now,
for
hold
it.
on briefly again. You're speaking like Isan Kuma did the last time here on the show. It quacks like a duck and a duck and all of that, and military training. So you are saying that by simply chanting military, refrain in their meetings, by simply responding to those, chants, by having their leaders go by designations that are, military designations, by having their leaders being ex-military or other security personnel, that is enough to render them in the colors that Manasseh did?
Yes.
A militia?
Yes, because I don't know what else you want to see. So they look like they are having military training. They have military people training them. They are going through what looks like the police and the military go through. Yes, they may have had other sides. For instance, there were other ladies there and people there who were looking for employment, etc. All of that. But you look for the important ingredients. And what we are saying is that you don't have to see them wielding arms and fighting people before you call them a militia. These are the things that I don't think that I don't think many or most of these groups start off as we are going to do these things which are illegal. So Manasseh saw certain things, looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it is a duck. Okay, now, we heard the response from the government. Look, I understand some of it, but some of it is not defensible. Now we have a question about whether Castle is a museum or not. We know Castle is not a museum. We know it is not.
The museum's board said it's a museum because the president declared it so.
Now, you in practice, I don't want to go into all kinds of experiences other people have had, but you had your people there and they were told by the people there, today, if you go there, what is going on there is not a museum. So what I'm saying is that, look, we have a problem. I think that some members of the government were as surprised as you and I. I really do believe so. Okay? And some people expressed a shock that, hey, what's this going on? It is clear that some of those people had friends or godfathers in the system, and that's why they remain there. I have had MPP people complain and said this shouldn't have happened. It wasn't necessary. Now they've removed them. You should have done this a year, 2 years ago. How did the person have an office inside the facility? And then you tell me, or you give me an excuse as if to say, well, we didn't know, where we got to know, we cleared them. Are we this insecure? Can you, Samson, walk into a museum and go and establish an office? So look, we have a problem. Let's all admit that we have a problem. Let's deal with it. They may have started as some group of people trying to organize themselves to take advantage of the political change and get employment. But in the process, they were becoming something else.
On their website, which went down in the course of last week, I have not checked again if it's back, they had clearly stated that they were sort of a private security group. Why call them a militia?
Because Professor Mensah Bonsu says we should call them what they are. You remember you and I were in a forum sometime back where you gave the speech, and I said that this thing about names, in marketing, the name is a brand. It gives people a certain mindset about you. So it's useful that we call things what they are so we can all appreciate them for that reason. But as a lawyer, it doesn't matter what you call somebody. It is what they do. Crimes are inferred from action, which is why even police in uniform, when they are on an operation and some of them commit crimes, they can be held personally responsible. It is what you do that makes you a criminal. It is not what you call yourself. So for me, I take the advice of Professor Mensah Bonsu that we should call them militias because that's what they are.
Well, there are those who also disagree with Professor Mensah Bonsu.
But then it comes down to what they
sort
do,
of over-elevating,
and then we can do that.
You know, the things that...
so we can deal with it appropriately.
Okay. I can't wait to lay my hands on the Commission's report to see how they describe them and what they say, because the Commission's secretary was called on this show, and he justified the nomenclature that the Commission had decided to, adopt instead of political vigilante. Now, because you are a media sort of watcher and monitor, and you are training journalists, and you are also at the forefront of ensuring that standards are kept, won't you agree with the government when they file a petition to the NMC and they say, by calling the group a militia, you were embellishing, you were being inaccurate, you were running commentary and not being factual. By calling the Castle Osu as a security installation, you were simply avoiding a fact which you already know, that the president was there on the 60th independence anniversary at an exhibition to task the tourism ministry to turn that place into a museum. So why call it a security installation and say militia are training at a security installation? In fact, in all the complaints, their major concern is these two things.
Well, something I think first of all, I've made my views public that I think the work that Manasseh did was a masterpiece of enterprising journalism that could only take a person with courage to do. Now, let me just come back to some of the issues you've raised, and based on what the government's responses have been. I think we need to establish the fact that this is a group that in 2012 and 2016 made its objectives and its existence known, that they exist as a group that seeks to protect the interests of the MPP and would protect ballot boxes during the elections and would seek to protect the MPP and its members from potential harm. And mind you, we are not talking about an established security agency like the police or the military or any of the allied agencies like the National Security or BNI. This is a group called the I, and this is how they described themselves and what they seek to do 2016, 2012. And so far, there has not been any denial that it is not this same group that made those comments. Indeed, it is the same person or the leaders of the group that we heard speak on another television station. And there was a newspaper publication that has not been denied. Now, in all this, including audios in the tape, the leader of the group is referred to as commander. I don't know, and perhaps whether it's an innovation or creativity, a group that says it's a recruitment agency with the CEO bearing the title commander. On their own website, they do indicate that this is a group that is trained by retired military officers. And you ask yourself whether, if indeed it's a group that exists to sort of help create jobs for people, were they seeking to put all those people who would be interested in the security agencies? Otherwise, why would they be a group being trained by retired military officers? Well, they haven't denied that they provided that service that was captured in the video at that function, that the president, the vice president, the speaker, and all those people that you could say are prominent in this country and therefore require the utmost security that you can think of being present. Now, in terms of the name militia, look, today we have terminologies like Islamist jihadists and all manner of terminologies that are being coined. Who coined these terms? And now they become acceptable. We use them internationally, and even in international documents, UN reports, and so on and so forth. You find all these things there. I don't think that when Boko Haram started, they described themselves as a group that sought to perpetrate mayhem on people. Indeed, people who speak Hausa will tell you Boko Haram means that, well, Western education, in the context of their understanding of Islam, constitutes something that is not right. And therefore, what they sought to do was to educate people about Islam and the fact that, you know, one getting themselves involved in Western education would eventually depart from the principles and the norms of Islam. But today we know what Boko Haram exists to do. Now, Professor Mensah Bonsu is not a mean person. This is a professor of law, a professor of criminal law. Don't forget that not too long ago, Professor Mensah Bonsu was serving as one of the highest officials in Liberia. And the job there was not just to manage, you know, do administrative things, but it was about, you know, the peace building process that was ongoing, the redeployment, you know, of course, you know all the terminologies, the disarmament, you know, maintaining the UN, the ECOWAS, the AU peacekeeping forces there. And I don't think that in doing this job, she wouldn't have had to study, you know, the genesis of these groups and what may have led to the Liberian Civil War and all of that.
You say this is a masterpiece of journalistic work. But my question directed to you particularly was because of the special place that you find yourself in seeking to moderate and ensure standards. The petition to the NMC, I can, you know, safely say it's a rehash of the rejoinder or the response.
Yes.
They said, and let's watch this, we ought to be patriotic to this country, not so. They say that the attempt by Manasseh Awine and Multimedia to portray the company as being engaged in the perpetration of acts seen in the first 6 minutes and 20 seconds of the documentary. He begins the documentary by bringing us library footage, Ayawa so and what happened, and so on and so forth. That is not what the group is seen to do, but he uses that and then to tell that story. So they say, or that they are doing this, or similar thereto, only exposes the mischief with which the documentary was laced, and does little credit to the reputation of a media house that prides itself as independent and guided by the ethics of the media profession. They say we bring the complaint because the substance of the story complained of is in various material essentials utterly false, a product of gross misrepresentation of facts, wild speculation by the producer of the documentary specified above, and same betrays a desperate attempt on the part of Multimedia and Manasseh Awine to vilify the sincere efforts by the President of the Republic, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, to end the worrying phenomenon of political vigilantism in the country. I read this last portion. Indeed, the story has the effect of tarnishing the image of the country, dampening investor interest, causing disaffection for the President of the Republic, and undermining efforts at curbing vigilantism in Ghana. Can't you put this against the documentary and say they have a point?
Absolutely not. Let me start from their own petition and ask, why do they relate the work to vigilantism and the efforts that they describe? And I hope and I believe it is so, that the president is genuinely making towards ending political vigilantism. Look, I don't think that Kojo, who has this ministry that petitioned the National Media Commission and has ever worked as a presenter, or at least worked here in the same media organization that perhaps now he finds issues with.
He's doing his job, not in a personal capacity.
And I'm absolutely not surprised about it. I think that the work that Manasseh has done has had quite a significant collateral damage on the government and the president, the party, and certainly given the role assigned them, they ought to do what they are doing. I don't think that they are suggesting that journalistically, when you are doing a story or producing a documentary, you shouldn't put it in context. And for me, the first 6 minutes, 20 seconds that they are talking about as referencing the events at Ayawaso, West Wuogon, was essentially to position the documentary in a context. And talking about political vigilantism and so on and so forth. Why are we all worried? We are all worried because this is a phenomenon that poses a significant threat to our democracy, the stability of our country, and the future, generally, of this country. And so to say that because the documentary starts with, the scenes that we all saw at Ayawaso, West Wuogon, which eventually, well, we are waiting for the commission's report, but based on what we heard and all that.
1 second. Please, 1 second. Boko Haram started as a religious education activist group. Today, they are affiliated with ISIS.
Yes.
He just told us what the end could be, and he was right.
He told us the end, or he told us what
the end could be. He put it in context.
Okay, let me get
Boko
and then get
was an education unit.
Something
they are in ISIS.
Lead us out.
Something briefly.
Yes.
I think in the course of it, then they say, well, the story is full of falsehood, fabrications, and so on and so forth. And when I read it, when the petition was filed, and I happened to read contents of it online, I decided, well, perhaps let's look into the documentary again. Now, is it true that there was a group that was operating and based at the castle? Yes, it's true. Is it true that this group is led by somebody who used to be the personal bodyguard of the president? Yes, that is true. Is it true that the group once provided a service at an event that had all these high-profile people there? Yes, it is true. Is it true that the group by itself, in previous conversations, had said they are a group, just as we call the Azoka boys, the Hawks, and so on, if you don't want to use the word militia, they agree that they are a vigilante group. Is it true? That
was a report by the Daily Guide. We do not know that they challenged it. It doesn't mean that they agree.
And a statement made by the leader on television. And this is audio.
That they were to
audio
protect
visual.
MPP members.
Exactly. So is it true?
Protecting MPP members, does that make them vigilante?
No, hold on. Is it true that it is a group that acknowledges that it is aligned with the ruling party? Yes, that is true. So if you look at all the issues that were raised and contained in the documentary, I am at pains to find which issues were falsehood. They talk about the castle not being a security zone or whatever. Look, 3 or so ministers of state at the office of the... Okay, 4 of them. Ministers of state at the office of the president works from this facility. Now, because of the denial, we all had, a ranking member of the Defense and Interior Committee talk about, as at that time, and this is just this week, what was happening at the Osu Castle. The joint exercise between the U.S. security forces and some Ghanaian security forces and other security forces from neighboring countries operating from within the castle, which ordinarily would have been a privileged information. And then this person says, well, because of the denial, I am forced to put this out.
Okay.
So if you then say the castle is not,
and Kweku, you do a documentary and you make emphatic statements of facts from your point of view, and then there are official sources that come to say, you say it's a military installation. It is not. It is a museum. Should we take the official source, or we should take what you want us to believe? There is the military, the Ghana Armed Forces, that is said to have been involved in locking up the place after the documentary. They come out, issue a statement, and they say, we're never involved in any such exercise.
No, but Samson, I think it's important that you limit it to the documentary and not stories that were done after the documentary.
No,
because we are talking about the credibility
it is important.
of the documentary.
Yes. Let's hear Kweku.
Look, specific rebuttals to specific aspects of an investigative documentary or any investigative project cannot and must not take away the substance of that investigative project. We have to stay focused. Admittedly, you can give a listening ear to those rebuttals and do an assessment of them on their own merit. And some of those rebuttals may have merit. But to overrate those rebuttals and the merit they have in order to deny the substance of a project is trying to choose my words. I want to be very charitable. Might be dishonest. I'm not too sure.
That's the softest word.
I was looking for.
Doc is asking you if that is charitable.
Because I couldn't find a way. I'm sorry. Maybe if you can find me a more liberal, moderate one. Disingenuous. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I like that. You see, let me be honest with you. In terms of documentaries, and it's global. When, after you've done the raw investigative project, unless it is exclusively meant for security or investigative agencies to deal with, if you decide to do a documentary for public viewing, there are certain illustrations that are brought to bear on the without necessarily them being reflective of the reality.
Context.
It happens every day. So, for me, yes, I saw that masked person. I saw the website, all those things. It didn't change my view that there's something very serious out there that ought to be interrogated. For instance, let's take the specifics. Oh, it's a castle is a security zone. No longer a security zone. It's now part of the museums and monuments. That's true. That's factual. The security assessment or stature or status of castle has been downgraded. That's a fact. The fact that there are ministries there is immaterial. But the truth of the matter is that it essentially remains a state facility that ought not to have been appropriated by any private group for any business.
The gardens, not the...
It's part of the installation.
Yeah, they had an office, but we have an explanation to why the guy had an office.
The gardens are on the beach, the sea. That's where the gardens are. Where are the gardens?
But we are told it's available to any member of the public. If you want to have a function there, you can
this
go
group
for it.
were stationary there and doing some business there, relative to even their own website address. Yeah. You see, so whilst you would want to make a point that's rebutted, that is no longer a security zone, perhaps it's been downgraded considerably. That's a fact. And I don't see why any journalist I would want to challenge that. Because really, take that away, the problem remains. It's a state facility. Ought not to have been utilized by a private group of that nature and was given the chance to do so. I think the government concedes that that was an error.
They should have. Yeah.
But it's an error that cannot be underestimated.
And in fact, when they were to be cleared, it took a combined team of police and national security personnel to get
And even
out.
if you watch the video itself, you see that the group had been having running battles. They had been having running battles with national security. Something that some of us were aware. Okay, in terms of their presence and operations in that facility. So, why waste time? I'm okay, you're going to National Media Commission, that's fine. That's a civilized, decent forum for a government to adopt. And that's what we should be encouraging. The group has gone to court. Again, I'm unable to challenge them. That's also civilized and decent approach.
Right.
Yeah, so we tackle those issues in those established. Because of even these two issues, I'm constrained in giving a full judgment or view on the issues. But something ought not to be hidden. The group had no business, earthly business, operating in a state facility. Then again, they've advertised their objects. Those objects come within a legal regime. If indeed those objects that they advertise, they operationalize them, if they did, because you see, when it comes to the fact that they put it there is immaterial, we must find evidence to the effect that they did engage in those activities. You are the lawyers. If there's going to be prosecution will be looking for that material evidence. If they indeed engaged in them, then the law must be activated. for them to answer some few questions. So for me, the bottom line is in the Manasseh thing, the contest, and I'm totally with the contest. See, the militia, vigilantes, what are they?
Militia in the heart of the nation.
Yes, I have a problem with Professor Mensah-Bonsu's description. I did, from day one. See, these groups, there's been violence here and there. Kumasi, somebody was killed. NPP earlier in their headquarters and others, there were violence. Delta Force invaded a court. They went to the regional coordinating secretariat to remove the coordinating. These are all acts of violence of varying degrees. But I can tell you something. They have not yet reached even the point of the action troopers and action groupers, who were correctly described by Dennis Austin as paramilitary groups.
They're on their way.
Let me just refer to you, if you're the struggle for power, 1954-56, this is by Dennis Austin, when he was talking about a paramilitary group, paramilitary organization of action groupers. That's the one for the NLM. They were then armed with cudgels, guns, and soda water bottles. Now, he gives you some details, and let me read the details.
Go ahead.
It was not difficult to come by guns of the sort used by farmers for hunting in the bush. A soda water bottle, shaken violently and then held at the adversary, is a very nasty weapon. It had a further advantage that it could be made to appear innocuous. That's the usual defense offered by the action grouper, that's the NLM, or the action trooper, the CPP, if brought to court, was that the soda water bottles were for refreshment. You see, if you shook it, you shook it hard and threw it into the crowd, it blasted and the bottles, like arrows, would spread. Indeed, the truth of the matter is that what we have today are not on the same level as the violence, the violence that they perpetrated. Look, we have party militants, party fanatics, party volunteers, party foot soldiers. They all misbehave. Party militia, the concept of militia, I don't see it today. We've had militias formed before in this country under the PNDC. We had the People's Militia, the Civil Defense Organization. They were armed, given few weeks training and armed. Last week, Isankuma was talking about one at the Kora.
Yes.
Go and check that record properly. When the incidents happened, there were attempts to actually give him clemency by the government prior to court. Post that, he went to court. High Court in Bolgatanga jailed him. He appealed here. I have assessed the court ruling, and he lost. But within 3 years, he was given amnesty and incorporated into the party. We have had militias in this country. Under this constitution, gradually, most of them phased out. Some were integrated in national security and other agencies like SEPS and the rest. They were integrated. The commandos are a special breed. They were not militias as such. They were regular soldiers, but trained in a specialized way, like the Nkrumah's Presidential Old Guard Regiment.
Okay.
So I think that sometimes the concept too is very important, the conceptualization. Because if the description is wrong, if you are not careful, your solution will be wrong-headed. So I don't agree.
Right. So Kuku, on the basis of this exposition you have made, which there are many who find reasonable because they don't agree with Professor Mensah-Bonsu's position or what is likely to become the Commission's position. Is it not the case that as a media house or a journalist, it is possible to make a concession and say, on the basis of this, I make a concession and I say on one or two of the counts that you raise against me, I'm sorry.
No, you know what? It's like killing an ant with a sledgehammer. You're asking too much of a journalist. I understood exactly what Manasseh was doing. He picked a cue from Professor Mensah Bonsu.
Exactly.
Look, this is a commission of inquiry set up by the president. And the narrative was changed from vigilantes to militia by a member, and indeed, I salute her. I think she's a great woman. I've always admired her anyway. Right. It's not because of the commission. Okay. But she's great mind, solid mind. And she pushed it, said this is warlordism and warlords and militia. The journalist, the narrative changed. So Manasseh fed into it. I don't think it's a substantive error. My view, to be honest with you, why waste time on that? Why don't you go for the substance of the documentary? Okay, so just a few pointers,
and as a senior journalist, clear those for me before I come to Prof. Dr. Kwete. They say that Joy gave a promo, and when we were doing a promotion, they use, library, footage, as in pictures.
Yes.
They went to BBC, yes, using some pictures from Nigeria's Boko Haram or so, and they use that to say that this is what you should expect when you watch the documentary. Government takes exception to that.
See, government can make the point. That's why I said specific.
They say that's misleading.
And so what? That's a big deal.
Is that allowed as a senior journalist? Is that allowed?
You see, I'm not a hypocrite, even though some people think I am. I sit here and make such a statement. Anas Arimeyao Anas does a lot of documentaries. Some went to court. You better check the cocoa smuggling case in court. Yeah. The raw footage and the documentary were both in evidence. The judge decided to concentrate or pass judgment on basis of the raw footage. And he explained why the documentary had been put aside. Because in the documentary, you see all sorts of illustrations that really weren't part of the investigative project.
Okay.
For instance, there were places where you see street lights. Now, where the bush where he went to do the thing, there were no street lights there. You see tipper trucks with cocoa loaded going to the port. It was to illustrate that this thing we do, we grow cocoa for export and to bring us revenue. But he put all that as part of the initial things to let people understand the history of cocoa production and export.
Okay.
But in the raw footage, there's none of that. That is pure, straightforward secret forming of those people in the action. So the judge drew an extension. If I were government, that's why I said, well, it's fair they've gone to media commission. That's okay. Perhaps it will help all of us. Right. Next time when we are doing documentaries, we may be a bit more circumspect and how we go about it. Okay. But I do not think we should aggregate those perceived discrepancies, if you like, aggregate them in a judgment form to negative the
okay. So the last question for you, and there are many journalists who are listening to this and watching this program. Once again, one thing they take issue with is that he speaks of a question he posed to the Director of Communications at the Office of the President, Eugene Ahin. And the answer he gets is that the president or the presidency is completely unaware of any such group operating in the castle or the castle gardens. The essential question they have asked is, for example, they say the documentary shows an answer to a question asked of the Director of Communications at the Office of the President, Mr. Eugene Ahin. The producer mischievously does not show the question asked, Mr. Eugene Ahin, but shows only the supposed answer. One is left in no position to tell the specific question Mr. Ahin was answering. And my good friend Paul Admochiri also takes this and says that it is wrong in journalism because you must tell the question and then tell us the answer.
Well,
so we know you asked the right question before you got
it's
the
a
answer.
legitimate inquiry to mount. You know me, I hardly do peer review,
right?
Because there's an element of hypocrisy and double standards there. What I'm going to talk about, perhaps I'm even more guilty of those transgressions than the person you are reviewing, and I've had that standard position of not doing that. But see, fortunately, they are going to media commission. So we'll see which question was asked but not posted in the video.
Okay.
But to be honest with you, I'm finding it difficult to say something. But you see, to be honest with you,
Because if you ask the question, is the presidency or the president aware of a militia group?
yes,
They can answer in the negative.
yes,
Because they are aware of a job recruitment agency.
Yes.
And not a militia group.
yes. So that's why I say it's a legitimate inquiry to mount. But really, I don't see why that question, missing from the documentary, takes away the substance of the documentary. Unfortunately, because this is a democracy, and because we have the mechanisms to cure whatever mission we perceive, they've gone to the media commission. That question could come out.
Okay.
Or even if I were Manasseh and the producer, realizing that these are questions people are asking. I've seen that question posed on social media.
Yes.
Okay.
Not just by government. I would have put the answer, the question out there already. Because really, materially, it will not cause any fatal injury
Okay, Koku,
to
before
the
I move
integrity
to Prof. Sakwete, and you also want to talk, but I want Prof to lead us out of this conundrum. I have been giving the question,
Interesting.
the very important question.
Interesting.
And the question is this. Good evening. I called earlier. I'm doing a story on DI Group, an MPP vigilante stroke militia group run by Akufo-Addo, aka Choman, a former bodyguard of President Akufo-Addo. I have information that the group operates from the Christiansborg castle. Some leaders of the group claim the president is aware of their operations there. I have spoken to a Jubilee House source close to the president who has denied the presence of the group at the castle and knowledge of the president, but that is not the official response. According to the source, I'll be happy to have the official response on the matter by close of tomorrow. And then the answer or the response was provided. The response, which is now being used as one that suggests that Eugene Ahin and Kojo Oppong Nkrumah contradicted each other, because whilst Eugene Ahin says they are unaware, Kojo Oppong Nkrumah says we were aware, but we have cleared them. So this is the answer to Manasseh. The president has no knowledge of the alleged activities of this said group, let alone sanction their activities. My checks from National Security have revealed that no such group is operating from the castle.
Yes. You see the question? So this very long, tall, huge question should have been part of the documentary. Who decides that?
Okay.
That's an editorial judgment I make. And it is not fatal to the integrity of the project. And that is why you see now questions have raised, and the journalist has provided answer. Something I was thinking of. That question will be provided to the media commission as well.
Right.
It's not a fatal injury. Look, let's focus. The context to end was the fact that there are groups, party fanatics, militants, volunteers, foot soldiers, call them any name, have become a challenge to safety and security of our politics and democratic dispensation. That's undeniable.
All right.
You remember one time I told you here that if it is they are even more dangerous when they are nameless and faceless. When they used to go out there as foot soldiers, do anything anyhow and get away.
Amorphous group.
When they began to put tax names on them, I thought that was okay. But their misbehavior, their misconduct relative to law ought to be sanctioned and punished.
Okay. Doc,
Yes.
so lead us out.
Well, first of all, I think there has been no concrete and commendable demonstration of what cherishing fearless honesty means than Manasseh Ezere's documentary. It came at the right time, but I want to look at the bigger picture as to whether a question was posed, the question must be quoted before an answer, and so on. As I said, these are some editorial judgments. we live in a place where they tell you when you write 2-3 pages, say, hey, it's too long. Reduce it to.
I failed that
two
test.
paragraphs.
Cabral, you thought you said brevity.
Brevity, yes.
I could never make it.
But I believe that in a court of law or whatever it is, all this information will be on the table.
Yeah.
And that is where it belongs. But I am interested in what contribution Manasseh has made to our understanding of what is happening. There are antecedents to his work. You know that, you remember ACP Agozo's tape, the viral tape that went on. It was something on vigilantes with Eden Idek. Then subsequently, we had COP Kofi Boachi at the New Year school warning that, hey, if we don't take steps now, we can't deal with 2020. Then, out of nowhere, within the same month, we saw this, what happened in Bawalishi, West Wogon. And what shocked everybody is police vehicles and dresses and masks. You couldn't see the gas cylinders and so on, but they were. You see, so a certain dimension, I think that was the greatest shock. And the shock intensified when the police said, well, yes, what and whatever, but it's not us. But we only know that it is the police that could have access to this, or it's the military. But all of them said, no, it's not us. So it raised a question. And I think for me, when I looked at Manasseh's documentary, I did it very snappily and so on. And I was trying to understand what it tells us. What it says is simple. The scare of vigilantism, or the rise of vigilantism that is getting militia, or is known, other experts call it violent political thugs. Okay? The violence was the emphasis. And we've always struggled to really call them vigilantes because, vigilantes have good purposes originally, and they work with the police. They complement law enforcement and so on. But in this case where they are competing or challenging police, that becomes something else. And what I found to be significant about Manasseh is that he was able to show, not only, because previously, if you read the news, whether it was propaganda or what, some security experts and NDC and so on had talked about, the presence of vigilantes in the sphere of the state institutions and apparatus. They said some are in the police, and then we also read on certain social media that the National Security Council Secretariat, also they are there, and so on and so forth. When you put all this together, you then come to the castle, which is Manasseh's contribution. Nobody thought of that. But these are all state entities. They are within the security apparatus. And what that means is that, how did they get to the castle? That is the scariest thing.
Well, the government has explained.
Pardon?
The government has explained.
Well,
that this guy was given an appointment.
I understand.
The question still remains, how does that extend to having 400 people
the castle,
on the lawn?
You see, the castle used to be the seat of government. But even when the move out, as Kweku said, certain ministers had their offices. So it's still a security place. Where the ministers are, you couldn't enter.
Not exactly a security place. It's a place of public importance. Security, there's classification for a facility in order to put it within the context
where
of state.
a minister
But it is not really a substantive case.
No, I'm not making a substantive. I'm illustrating to show the importance that the ministers were there.
Dr. Kwesienin insists that it is. Because when he was attending to the Emil Short Commission, he had to go through a particular search that gave him the impression that
the commission was in session. That could have brought about a certain upgrading for a while. There are many places we go. We are searched and things.
I suppose the same that would have happened when the Justice Brobe Committee was also doing its work from that place.
So we go into the hotels these days. They search our
No, go ahead. You have all the time. You have all the time.
I'm sorry.
Don't worry about anybody taking it. So long as the president is not using the place, obviously the security grading will drop. But it is also the fact that there were state officers there, ministers and so on.
Right.
And even if you move away from there,
Not there were, they are.
they still are.
Yeah.
I thought they said they evacuated.
They are.
Or
No,
just
the ministers
okay.
are.
The
Those
ministers are there.
yes.
So it's an institution of state. So the question then is that how does this group get in? What I understand private securities to be doing, I am told they were introduced in the 70s or 80s and so on, is that there's a state entity responsible for them. They come under the police supervision, your training, licensing to carry arms or not, and so on. And that also raises questions, was the police involved in this or not? Okay. And then you go on to say that if indeed they
Manasseh
are...
found
Yes.
through his inquiry at the Interior Ministry,
Yes.
which has the power by law
Yes.
to license you to operate as a private security organization, that they were not licensed.
You see, so you have a consistent trend. There are situations they said, oh, the army is involved or has done, the army says, I'm not. Then you have the police, you see
But
the
that is not
police.
in the documentary.
No, I'm not saying, I'm not talking about the documentary.
Question of removal from.
I'm not talking about the document. I'm saying I'm looking at the bigger picture. And so what it did was to really expose that what had been said earlier, there is actually a vigilante presence, okay, spreading into the security apparatus of the state. And everybody is denying or disowning what is happening. And I think it is important that it is investigated thoroughly, because we cannot solve the problem of vigilantism without understanding the means or the forms in which they've penetrated in spheres of the state and the impact they are having on the efficacy of the legitimate state institutions. Okay, we cannot. So it's a very important matter. If indeed the dialogue that we're expecting from the party, we cannot disband militia just without knowing every bit of their mechanisms of operation, of evolution, their tentacles, and who supports them. I think that I honestly do not and would not push the idea that when whoever is found, or this illegality, as I would say it, in the sphere of the state, is something that has the sanction of the president. I don't believe that unless your investigation leads you to that. However, it is possible that people who are put in positions of trust, okay, and are required to do certain things, have acted ultra vires without, or misled. It is important that we investigate this thing.
Exactly.
And that is where I see Manasseh's contribution, that there's a phenomenon, right? And so it led me to reflect more and said, we all know vigilantes. We saw them in 2012, 2014, 2015, or 2016, and never did we see the skill that, they were actually in state institutions, and that somehow, how do you say, they render the police, how do you say, something like, they are not able to act. There's a word I can't quickly
Emasculate.
Oh, no.
Impotent.
It has effect on the institution. So I went back and said, why would COP, a police commissioner, and come and say, there is something coming and we can't deal with it? Does this throw light on that? If not, that for me is what Manasseh's case. It shows how it's eating into and probably crippling the institution, okay? Making them, paralyzing them. Okay. They are not able to act. And now they are calling on citizens, come in and so on and so forth. It is an important subject. We should take greater interest in seeing who perpetrated the illegality. How long did they stay in the castle? As a state entity, a very important thing. I don't know whether the castle really, they have been implementing the president's directive. If the president said this is a museum, the Museums and Monuments Board, how did they act on it from the time the president announced it and now? What have they done to transform the place?
In fact, the release by the Museums Board says the president had declared the place a museum.
Okay, but operationally...
Okay, that is not factual.
Okay.
The president attended an exhibition during the 60th anniversary celebration.
Yes.
And then tasked the tourism ministry to work towards turning the place into a museum.
Okay. work towards.
So perhaps this release is the first official communication that the job the president had handed them has been completed.
No, it's still not.
It's
you
not.
see, executive action must be clear.
You see,
so let there be a declaration, let there be a document.
The president said there were
processing.
going to be a lot of things there.
Yeah.
You know,
so perhaps
look,
now from this release and confirmation from the museums board, we should go there and see the things the president said we will see when it is turned into a museum. Whether they are there or they are not there. But apparently,
in transit, it's a transitional process.
Apparently, if you check now the museum's board's own website, there are castles that have become museums. They do not include those castles.
Something.
Okay,
Those are
right.
Okay.
Process.
It's omission in update.
For me, I just want us to focus on what is important because it has a bearing on the president's ability to deal with the vigilante problem and also strengthen the state. Because if you're going to deal with vigilantes or outlaw them, you must strengthen the police. Okay, and the more information you get, the better. I feel that there are people within the state apparatus who had acted in a way, okay, that they are not owning, is undermined the real institutions for which the president is also responsible for. And this then is covering up because we don't know enough and we are distracted. Oh, was this edited? Should it have been this and so on? The truth is that how did they get in? Who was in charge? What did the person do? What heads must rule? What authorization? These are questions that would help us design or have a much effective architecture in dealing with vigilantism because their penetration of the state is extremely dangerous. It's crippling. It's paralyzing them. Okay. And that for me, I think is the contribution.
Okay, let me confess a disappointment.
Yeah.
That last week, the entire panel appeared to be one mind, added them. Today, the same trajectory. So none of you can see any wrong in what has gone on.
Quick one. Look.
That there is, as the government says, misrepresentation, over-embellishment, and all of these.
No, you have to look at the facts.
I've said
This
those
paints a
perceived
picture
omissions should not be overrated to the extent of undermining
the substance
of the documentary. That's what I said.
Something is happening. Something is happening.
The reason why he had his hand up long very well. So I'm taking just 2 minutes, 2 minutes
very
each,
short time.
and then we
My
move
time
on.
is the short.
Oh, you had
okay. I'm generous.
It's not. When you watch that, you will see it was not. Yes.
No, I guess maybe very soon we'll be transitioning to the other broader conversation about militants. But so a quick one still on this documentary. Look, fortunately, the Minister of State in charge of national security did comment on it. And from his commentary, it is established that, at least he says, they were aware of their presence at the castle.
Job recruitment.
Yes, for a purpose of job recruitment. They warned them the first time, they warned them the second time, and on the third occasion, they had to use the national security and the police to evict them. So at least I think it's important that we establish that whether it is true they were a job recruitment agency, which their website didn't.
But don't forget, he asked that whoever is responsible for the castle gardens should be held accountable.
Well, but this was after they were aware. They attempted first time, second time, it didn't work. Now, Samson, I think that for me, I'm delighted that the group decided to go to court. It's within their rights. And not because I want these actions to be brought, to be brought against Multimedia or whatever. But you see, I always love that aspect of you guys who are lawyers and go to court. The segment you call cross-examination.
Right.
I think this would present a great opportunity for us to hear a lot about this group. Because see, the Ayawaso West Wogon Commission, maybe for time limitation and so on, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth, did not have the opportunity.
That I feel uncomfortable because I'll be the one doing the cross.
Well, I think that many of the issues that have gone unanswered, or government denying and the documentary affirming, we would get to know the facts from the group in court. And I think that it's also good that there is a petition to the National Media
So
Commission.
the matter in court,
and I say so because this is a new commission.
Right.
This is a very, very, I wouldn't say controversial, but an important matter brought by government. And for the first time, I'm not saying that therefore there will be issues, but this is the first time we have an appointee of the president as the chairman of the Media Commission. And this is a matter by government. Of course, the National Media Commission chairperson does not have that powers that say the Electoral Commission chair would have. He may not even have a casting vote, but the committee that will sit on the matter, given the fact that he's the chair, he would be chairing it. And I think we would watch quite closely to see how all this...
Okay, but that is not to say that once you're appointed by the president or the government, you cannot be independent in your thinking.
Of course, you
cannot be impartial.
And can the government remove him?
Yes, the government can remove him, and there has been an occasion where, you know, whilst the matter was even ongoing, and yesterday I had this information from the commission, you know, people who are giving the commission.
You mean the government can remove the chairman of the NMC?
The government can withdraw the appointment. And by virtue of that, you cannot continue to be...
We need to double check.
And
the NMC?
Yes, the NMC.
Well, like they say, there are many ways to kill a cat.
I hear you.
know,
just like the GBC boss.
Yes.
Okay.
And Mills did it.
Go check.
So there is an example
how the one who was there was removed.
Yes. There is an example of the president's appointee being removed by the president.
Thank you. Now, Kofi, your 2 minutes, tie it in with this. A comment from Note. He says that senior police officers are speaking. CSOs are speaking. Ayawaso happened. The murder of Ahmed Swale happened. The Kumasi killing happened. We must appreciate the context of Manasseh's piece and stop waffling.
Absolutely spot on, and it's in line with what I was going to say. See, these groups evolve. Usually they don't start as we are going to set up a group to go and cause trouble. They evolve. What Manasseh is trying to say is that in the heart of the city, there is one evolving. I said Boko Haram means books are a curse. They started as an educational unit. Today they are affiliated with ISIS. The reason why you've had unanimity twice on this level is because we are able to look at this objectively and see the risk is present. However, people in government clearly are embarrassed. I am telling you because I've spoken to some people. They themselves are surprised and they don't like what's happened. But they are embarrassed. Unfortunately, instead of the embarrassment leading to an investigation, let's find out what went wrong and let's fix it. They are coming, they are reacting, and then trying to defend. And sometimes in the process, untruths are being peddled. And then you have a situation where a deputy national security minister also is saying we should go and ask the gardener. These things border on insulting our intelligence. When you have the castle, can you put 400 people on the garden of a museum for a period of time and do military training? So my point is this, please, it is futile to fight Manasseh Azure. There's a point to what he's saying, and there's truth to it. Like Kweku said, if he even made mistakes in some specifics, you can't elevate that to remove the substance of what is done. We appreciate that you are embarrassed, but you must appreciate that what is more important is where did things go wrong? Police are complaining, we are all complaining. Fix this before they become a lion we can't control.
So two minutes, Kweku, and Prof.
It's on this point of how we conceptualize some of these things. I'm going back to that thing and why I disagree with the good professor, Madam Henrietta Mensah-Bonsu. You use the wrong nomenclature, you get a solution wrong. You recall the South African tray and the tagging that was put on their mercenaries. You remember? From the highest level. It was a distortion of what they really were. You remember the case went to court? Do you remember the charges? I remember you making points on that. You see, so we created a huge animal out there, went to court with offenses bordering on misdemeanor. That would have led to, assuming conviction, bond of some 6 months or a fine. We ought to have a sense of proportion.
And we didn't pursue that also because we were not too sure. So we just took them out of the country.
We took them out, we removed them. So that's the point I'm making, that sometimes it's important for the apt description to be brought to bear. But in this case,
wait. Yes.
And my fundamental problem is with what came out from the commission. I'm actually in a hurry to read their report to see if they stuck to this whole thing about militia.
You won't believe, as I came here this morning, I was just praying that Kweku will flip some document and say, here is the commission's report.
I am aging now.
I just think Kweku's thing about the militia does not entirely tell the story that a militia is evolving. You see, the previous cases, you did not have anybody claiming they were within the arena of the state. Okay, and being trained by ex-military officers, and they have been seen in some military fatigues.
No, but we've had the history of militias that were state-sponsored.
Yes, but if you look at how they evolved in also some post-war, Liberia, Sierra Leone, sometimes these same trained people broke into military armory.
Yeah.
And then took over. In fact, either the soldiers ran or they took over that camp and use it now. Now they have access to weapons.
But Doc, if they have a wrong motive, if they have a sinister motive, why would they advertise their former military persons?
Well, but you also have camouflage.
They
even in
advertise
dressing. You would have a veneer. This is what I do. In actuality, what do they do? You know, and so on. It is true that they could have people who are providing, you know, civil functions or duties. Okay. They have an economy that will sustain them. But look at the history of the militias in Liberia and so on. They had all.
Yeah. You see,
so something
forces,
something is in evolution,
appear more
and probably
aggressive.
Yes, you see,
violent than this group.
Maybe
honestly.
we have seen this, but the components are there. And I think what is more frightening is that whatever it is, the response of the boot for boot. response. The inauguration of regional, told you that we are drifting in a democracy that parties must look at real issues of them and so on.
I use my 2 seconds.
Thank you.
Just 2 seconds. Yes, please.
2 seconds.
Because Kweku keeps going on this.
But Kweku keeps going on. You don't think he's fair when he says, and it's reasonable to say, when he says that this group looks modest, they look, well organized, and you don't see any tendencies of aggression on their part.
You cannot tell me. Let me answer my question. No. We have continued. Azoka boys belong to Mr. Azoka. Okay.
No, they are community development.
Please, hold on. Let me finish. Look, I'm going to read to Kweku that. Look, the militia, and I just took this, is one. An irregular armed force enabling its leader to exercise military, economic, and political control over a subnational territory within a sovereign state. Example, warlord. This looks like Mr. Azoka's boys. Now, a militia, okay, it is generally an army or some other fighting organization of non-professional soldiers or citizens of a nation or subjects of a state who can be called upon in the time of need.
And so,
let me finish.
But
Let me finish. Hold on, let me finish.
At this stage of their
at
development,
this stage, hold on,
to accept that
see,
concept.
I keep making the point of evolution. And I said Boko Haram was a religious educational activist group. Today they've evolved into a wing of ISIS.
So
what we are saying is that
militia.
No,
they are evolving.
That's why I read this. It says
Precision
they
is
are
important.
citizens
It can be,
who can be called upon at the time of
if we
need.
don't
So
use
it
that,
can be an adolescent militia.
We should just not.
if you don't use the right concept.
I agree with that principle,
It's
but
a
I'm saying
militia,
that
but
we
it's
should
true.
treat
Whether
this
it's
well
adults,
because it is
it's
what
youth
it will
or
become,
adolescent.
which is an issue. What it will become.
But you see,
They can be called upon in a time of need.
They
Yes.
say
That's the thing there.
And they are equipped to
they
use
say
weapons.
their registered objective is recruitment. And they had one of their members, so a woman claiming to be a member, a 60-year-old woman or so, who says, we are not. So the 60-year-old, that's the question people are asking, is a job seeker.
When the need came for providing security for the state, they mobilized themselves into a security organization. For the state, at the Dombo
that was
thing.
a party event.
Yes, but the president
just
was
draw
there.
the distinction.
Why did they release the police?
They mobilized into that.
Thank you.
But
Your
not
2 seconds
the
is gone.
state.
No,
Come here.
you see, I just wanted to comment on the point about.
We're also doing so in 2 seconds.
No, yes, in 2 seconds. The point about this
I'll
group
time
may
you.
be quite modest and, unlike the Azoka boys, the Kandahar, the Invisible, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, we don't have the benefit of knowing the activities of this group beyond the fact that the documentary establishes its existence, where they operate from, and so on and so forth.
And that
but
is
within the
significant.
documentary, even as we are not doing a content analysis of the documentary's content, remember that somebody in there, in fact the leader, says to the group that for last weekend there was no arrest, and previously, you know, we had to always deal with, you know, issues of getting our people who are arrested, and so on and so forth. Question is, what is it that members were doing that gets them arrested, you know, regularly? That for the fact that during one weekend there was no arrest, it was something that the leader
It's
was
good
putting
point,
out there.
but we cannot exaggerate.
So we don't know.
Thank you.
Exactly, we don't know.
No, that's
Thank
right.
you.
And the fact
It
is
needs
that
to be
if they
investigated.
are like
So if we
invisible
don't
forces,
know,
Kandahar boys,
we shouldn't
you know,
rely on the unknown to come to conclusions.
No, but in this case, we are relying on what they have said. It's not what I am saying.
Okay.
Yes,
thank
but
you.
not
Thank
a-
you. So we
not
take,
enough
we
for
take a break,
exaggeration.
and when we return, we will ask the question whether or not there is true commitment to disbanding political militia, or it will end with just exchange of letters, as we have seen go on between the NDC and the president. But I take a break on this note of the petition, which says that the complaint is brought, you know, because the substance of the story complained of is in various material essentials utterly false, a product of gross misrepresentation of facts, wild speculation by the producer of the documentary specified above, and same betrays a desperate attempt on the part of Multimedia and Manasseh Azore to vilify the sincere efforts by the President of the Republic, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, to end the worrying phenomenon of political vigilantism in Ghana. And of course, they talk about how unpatriotic this one is because it tarnishes the country's image, dampens investor interest, causes disaffection for the president, undermines the efforts at curbing vigilantism.
That's an overkill.
Yes. And these petitions, I remember in the previous regime, we had about 3 of them.
Yeah, it's not
Yes,
peculiar.
that this institution was against the government. Once again, we have it. This institution is against the government.
I know
We'll be
that.
right back.
But you were boycotted.
Yeah, we're boycotted. We'll be right back.